This is the brand new Insta360 X4, which offers an incredible 8K resolution for the absolute ultimate when it comes to 360 image quality. Hey, wait. This is the Insta360 One RS 1-inch edition, which has dual 1-inch sensors, which are 4 times the size of the sensors on your X4. So clearly this is going to give you the better image quality. Yeah, but it's only 6K resolution. This is 8K resolution, so the images are going to be way more detailed. Look, cramming a few extra pixels onto that tiny sensor isn't going to make that much difference. It's the large sensor size which is going to give you the better image quality. Well, I guess there's only one way to find out. So today we're going to be comparing the new Insta360 X4 against the One RS 1-inch edition to see which one is the best. So stick around and let's find out. Did you just drink my beer? Oops. About 1 month ago, Insta360 launched the brand new X4 as the successor to the very popular X3. Now they gave it a lot of upgrades and new capabilities, but one of the things that they did not give it, that some of us, myself included, were expecting, was a bigger sensor. Now, why were we expecting a larger sensor? Well, there is another camera already in the Insta360 lineup for a couple of years now, the One RS 1-inch edition, which has exactly that. It has dual 1-inch sensors, which are 4 times the size of those on the Insta360 X4. Now, of course, that makes the camera larger, but it offers a number of key advantages, including higher dynamic range, better low-light performance, and several others as well. Now, there are rumors out there that the One RS 1-inch will also get an upgrade later this year, but for the time being, these are the choices when it comes to the top-of-the-line 360 cameras from Insta360. So today we're going to do a comparison test to see which one of these is the best and which one you should look at buying if you're in the market for a 360 camera. Now there's a lot to cover, of course, so I'm going to place the chapters up here as usual and also place them on the video timeline. And before we get started, very importantly, this video is not sponsored, paid for, or influenced in any way. All of the equipment was purchased with my own money and the opinions are entirely my own. So let's get on with it. Now, I definitely don't want to bore you with a bunch of specifications. If you want those, head to the Insta360 website. But in this section, I just want to go over some of the key differences between the X4 and the One RS 1-inch, which I'm just going to refer to as the RS. So, in short then, you can basically say that the X4 outspecs the RS in almost every specification. When it comes to recording video, the X4 offers resolution of up to 8K versus 6K on the RS. When it comes to higher frame rates, the X4 offers 5.7K up to 60 frames per second and 4K up to 100 frames per second. The only high frame rate that the RS offers is the ability to record up to 3K at 50 frames per second. When it comes to recording stills, the X4 offers either 18 megapixel or 72 megapixel, but do keep in mind that those files do get pretty large, whereas the RS only offers the single choice of 21 megapixel stills. When it comes to time lapses, this is one area where the X4 really stands out, offering up to 11K resolution for time lapses, whereas the RS tops out at 6K resolution. And a couple of other things worth mentioning. Firstly, the bitrate, which is the amount of data stored per second of recording. So the higher the bitrate, the higher the quality of the file. The X4 offers bitrates of up to 200 megabits per second, whereas the RS offers 120 megabits per second. And also worth mentioning is the encoding options. The X4 offers the choice between the H.264 encoding or the more modern and efficient H.265 encoding, whereas the RS only offers the older H.264 encoding. Now, there is one specification where the RS outperforms the X4, and that is, of course, in its sensor size. So the sensors on the RS measure 1 inch diagonally versus a ½ inch diagonally on the X4, so the area of the sensor is 4 times the size. What this means is that simply more light gets to the sensor, so this should result in higher dynamic range and contrast in your images and also better low light performance. When it comes to features, the X4, of course, being 2 years younger, has a lot more built into it, including a whole bunch of single lens modes, none of which are offered on the RS. You also have things like the Me mode, pre-recording, and various other additional features also. So when it comes to the design, the obvious difference between the two is the size of the RS, which is mainly due to the very large lens attachment. Now, I'm not sure why it needs to be quite this large, but I'm sure there are reasons, and hopefully this is something that they can improve on the next generation. The next clear difference between the two is the screen. So you have this huge, I believe, 2.2 inch screen on the X4 versus a 1 inch screen on the RS. And as you can see, the larger screen makes it a lot easier to see what you are filming, review your footage, or access the menus, whatever the case may be. Now, if we take a closer look at the X4, we have obviously an integrated design. We have an on-off button on the side, a quick menu button, we have a record button on the front, and a customizable button here also. On the other side, we have access to the USB port, and we remove the battery, and we have access to the SD card here. And of course, once these are all closed and locked, this is completely waterproof down to a depth of 10 meters. Now, if we contrast that with the RS, we have a power button on the side here and a record button, no buttons on the front. And of course, the design of the RS is a modular design. We have access to the USB port for charging or file transfer here. Although here the USB port is USB 2.0, on the X4 it is USB 3.0 for faster data transfer. Now, if you want to access the memory card, you actually have to disassemble the entire modules, and you have access to the memory card in the underside of what's called the core module here. So it's a little bit cumbersome. Now, one advantage, of course, that the modular system has is you can take these modules and you can combine them with other lenses to make different cameras here. As far as the battery is concerned, this is, I believe, about 1300 milliamp hours versus approximately 23 milliamp hours on the X4. So if you are recording in 6K on the RS, you get around about an hour. I think it's 62 minutes of recording time. If you're recording 5.7K on the X4, you can actually get 135 minutes of recording time. Okay, before we get to the test results, just a few quick words about the test setup. So for all of these tests, I had the cameras set up side by side, similar to the way you see them here, with the front-facing lens facing the primary subject. I set both cameras as far as possible to the same conditions. I had auto exposure, auto white balance. I set the color profile to the standard setting and the image sharpness to the medium setting, and I also set the highest bitrate on both cameras. As far as the post-processing is concerned, the only thing I did with the files was to load them into the Insta360 Studio and reframe them, trying to get as close as possible to the same view on both cameras, and there were no additional editing or enhancement steps done to the files. So with all that said, let's check out the results. So let's start out with a standard video example in nice bright daylight. At this particular view, I don't really see a lot of difference between the two, although I do find the colors of the RS to be a little more natural. It's only when we zoom in close that you really start to see the benefit of the X4's 8K resolution. Now, even though 8K isn't recommended on the X4 for low light, I figured I would give it a try anyway. You can see that the image from the RS is brighter with a little more dynamic range, and you'll notice that the branches and leaves on the tree are a lot sharper. Here, if you look at the house, you can see significantly better detail and contrast, and on the X4 you can also see quite a bit of noise in the darker areas. I switched the X4 over to 5.7K, which is recommended for low light conditions, but to be honest, I really don't see that much difference. Here too, the RS shows better contrast and dynamic range, with sharper images and lower noise. I waited until it got really dark and then I continued the test. And as you can see, it's pretty much the same results. Now, to be honest, neither video is particularly high quality, but the RS continues to show slightly better contrast, dynamic range, and detail. I even switched the X4 to the 5.7K plus mode, but this really didn't make any difference. For the first stills test, we'll compare the X4 at 18 megapixels to the RS at 21 megapixels. In this first image, the RS for me definitely shows better sharpness, better contrast, and has more pleasing colors. And zooming in makes this even more obvious. Zooming in all the way, both images begin to lose definition, but the RS continues to have the slight advantage. So let's now check out the full 72 megapixel resolution on the X4. At this magnification, frankly, I still prefer the image from the RS. Even if we zoom in slightly, the RS continues to show good sharpness, but has better contrast and better colors. It's really only when we zoom in all the way that you see the benefit of the 72 megapixels of the X4. Next up, let's go indoors for a virtual tour type shot. First impressions, the RS has definitely produced the better image here. It appears sharper, has better dynamic range, the colors are more true to life, and there's much less noise. That being said, the X4 has done a much better job of exposing the brightness from outside. Zooming into the max, I'm really not seeing any benefit of the X4's 72 megapixels in this particular example. For the final test, I did a dusk time-lapse. Starting out with reasonable light, you can see how the 11K resolution shows significantly better image detail on the X4. But what happened next really surprised me. With both cameras set to auto exposure, as the light faded, I expected the X4 would struggle. But as you can see, it was exactly the opposite. With the RS showing increasing noise and eventually losing the image altogether, while the X4 continued to provide excellent quality results. Well, that's certainly a lot of information to digest, but one thing is clear to me from looking at all these various test results is that there is so much more to image quality than just pixels and resolution. Now, in the final test, the time-lapse, very clearly the X4 just blew away the RS in that particular test. But if we look at all the other tests, the standard video test, the low light tests, the indoor and outdoor still photo tests, I would say that the RS actually provided overall higher image quality, even in cases where the X4 was providing higher detail. For me, the contrast and dynamic range were better on the RS. You could see a lot more differentiation of the light and dark parts of the image. You could see better differentiation of the colors. On the subject of color, I found that the RS provided better straight out of the camera colors with no need for reprocessing. Also, in the low light shots and anywhere where there were darker shadows, you saw much less noise on the RS, and as a result you were able to maintain sharpness even in low light conditions. So when it comes to the question, which one would I buy? The answer is very clear: the X4. Now, I know I just got done telling you how the image quality on the RS is better in most cases, and that's definitely true. But the differences are subtle, and in most cases I don't think they're really going to be noticeable unless you actually put the two side by side. But when you look at what the X4 offers in comparison to the RS, it really is an easy decision. It's much smaller and lighter, easier to travel with, easier to work with. It's fully integrated and waterproof. The battery lasts about double the amount of time. You've got a much larger screen to work with, and you have a whole host of additional modes which are not available on the RS, including the ability to run at 60, even 100 frames per second, the various single lens modes that allow you to use it similar to just any standard action camera, and many other features that the older RS simply does not have. Now, with all that said, I do think that the RS does have a place for certain users. For example, if your primary use for a 360 camera is shooting virtual tours, I think you're going to get better results using the RS. Similarly, if you do a lot of low light work, again, I think you're going to see better results with the RS, but obviously you have to put up with its negatives, which includes its size and weight. It's awkward to work with. You have to disassemble it to get the memory card out. It's not waterproof, and so on and so on. And last, but of course by no means least, the X4 comes in at $499 versus $799 for the RS. So for the time being, this is the clear choice, I think, for most people. It will be interesting to see what comes as the successor for the RS. So that wraps up our comparison test of the X4 versus the One RS 1-inch edition. I would be very interested to hear what your comments are on this. Please go ahead and put those into the comments section. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please remember to give us a like, and also consider subscribing to the channel for a lot more content on Insta360, DJI, and various other topics as well. Thank you for watching.